competition. It's coming from Brazil, and it's why U.S. firms have been importing beans into the U.S. Just this week, Bunge and the Andersons chartered at least 2 cargoes from Brazil.
Despite Donald Trump blinking on a bunch of the big disastrous tariffs on the whole world, and among the Americans who will almost immediately feel the pain are farmers.
In the middle of America's corn belt, something is happening that almost no one is talking about. Grain bins are full, shipping containers are stalled, and contracts that once flowed like clockwork have gone silent. The US corn industry, once the undisputed global leader in agricultural exports, is now facing a collapse so severe that over 94% of its corn exports have been wiped out in just a matter of days. What used to be America's golden crop has now become its most quietly rejected product on the global market. But this is not just a story about corn. It is not just a trade disruption or a policy mistake. This is a story about how a single label, a simple phrase printed on every bag of corn, has become a symbol of fear for global buyers. And later in this video, we'll reveal the shocking detail about one specific US state's corn that got turned away despite being in perfect condition. The reason will leave you speechless. For now, we begin in the heart of the action. Ports across the globe, from Shanghai to Rotterdam to Jeddah, are seeing something they never expected. Dozens of containers filled with high-quality American corn are sitting untouched. Not because they are contaminated, not because they failed inspection, but because they are stamped with the words, "Product of the United States." That label, which once guaranteed excellence, now signals risk. There are no headlines announcing this collapse. There are no international press conferences, just silence, the kind of silence that exporters dread. Phone calls are no longer returned. Emails remain unanswered. Contracts vanish without a trace. The collapse of US corn exports is not loud. It is subtle, and that makes it even more dangerous. Just last year, the United States exported more than $5 billion worth of corn. It was a pillar of the American agricultural economy. From Iowa to Nebraska to Indiana, corn was king. Today, the same farmers who fed nations are struggling to find a single buyer. Back in the Midwest, the emotional toll is visible. Farmers stare at grain silos that are still packed with last year's harvest. Ethanol plants are cutting back production. Trucking companies are laying off drivers. Even small towns built on corn money are seeing restaurants close and schools reduce services. This is not just an agricultural issue. This is a community crisis, a national economic warning sign that few are willing to acknowledge. So what caused this sudden crash in US corn exports? At the center of it all is the global perception of American trade reliability. Over the last several years, international buyers have grown increasingly wary of doing business with the United States. This is not about corn quality. It is about politics. It is about unpredictability. It is about risk. Countries like China, Japan, Egypt, Mexico, and South Korea have all begun looking elsewhere. They are not rejecting American corn outright. Instead, they are ghosting it. They are quietly shifting their purchases to other nations. Nations that provide consistency. Nations that stay out of geopolitical drama. Nations that do not impose last-minute tariffs or change export rules overnight. One of the biggest winners in this shift has been Brazil. In May, a report from the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates revised Brazil's corn production up by 4 million tons. That may sound small, but it was the spark that ignited a global realignment. Brazil is now expected to produce 130 million tons of corn. That is a number too big for global buyers to ignore. And it is not just the quantity of Brazilian corn that matters. It is the political neutrality. Brazil is not engaged in trade wars. It is not threatening sanctions. It is not embroiled in global tensions. That makes it a safer bet, a more stable partner, the kind of supplier that makes international contracts easy to manage. American corn producers are not just losing to Brazil, though. Canada is making quiet but powerful moves. Provinces like Alberta and Manitoba have invested heavily in grain logistics. Their terminals are modernized. Their tracking systems are digitized. Buyers in Japan and the Middle East can now trace every step of a Canadian corn shipment in real time. From seed planting to harvesting to storage and shipping, everything is logged and transparent. In contrast, many US co-ops still rely on fragmented systems, paper records, outdated tracking methods, no centralized database. For international buyers demanding full traceability, that is a problem. A big one. Now remember earlier, we mentioned a shocking rejection from a major US corn state. Here is what happened. In 2025, at the port of Shanghai, 20 shipping containers filled with pristine Nebraska corn were left baking in the sun. This was not low-quality grain. It passed every standard. It was clean. It was high grade. Yet it was rejected. The reason? The label on the containers said, "Product of the United States." The official excuse listed was unclear origin. That vague phrase was all it took to send 18,000 tons of corn back across the Pacific Ocean. And it was just the beginning. Nebraska has long been one of America's top corn exporters. Its grain helped feed Asia and powered economies from Saudi Arabia to Vietnam. But now, its co-ops are struggling to meet new documentation demands. Countries like China want detailed records that include seed variety, pesticide logs, handling certifications, and more. Nebraska's decentralized systems cannot keep up. Even Illinois, once the backbone of US grain transport, is suffering. Its perfect geography, major rail lines, and access to the Mississippi River have not saved it. The warehouses in Cairo and Peoria are packed. Conveyor belts have stopped. Corn that should have been long gone is still sitting there, deteriorating. At the same time, Canadian shipments are moving like clockwork. No drama, no headlines, just clean paperwork, stable pricing, and prompt deliveries. That is what global buyers are choosing now. Not because Canadian corn is better, but because it is easier. The shift is already reshaping the global agricultural landscape. Countries that once relied almost entirely on US corn are finalizing new multi-year deals with Brazilian and Canadian suppliers. These are not temporary stopgaps. These are long-term pivots that could take decades to reverse. And as these new trade routes cement themselves, the United States is losing more than just market share. It is losing influence. It is losing trust. It is losing the legacy it spent generations building. American corn was once a symbol of abundance, a symbol of agricultural mastery. That symbol is now being quietly erased from international shelves. This is the part of the story the headlines are missing. This collapse is not just about missed shipments or rejected containers. It is about a shift in global belief. A belief that the United States could always be counted on. That belief is fading. And with it goes one of the most powerful engines of the American economy. Corn is not just a crop. It is the foundation of ethanol production. It feeds livestock. It supports entire communities. When corn stops moving, the ripple effects touch every part of rural America. In some towns, local diners that once served lineups of farmers and truckers now sit empty. Equipment suppliers are closing down. Community banks are tightening credit. Schools are reducing budgets. It is a domino effect. And it all started with the slow disappearance of trust in American exports. So what is the path forward? Can the US regain its footing in the global corn market? Experts say it is possible, but it will take more than just good harvests. It will require systemic change, a complete modernization of export infrastructure, unified digital records, transparent supply chains, and above all, political stability. If the US wants to be the world's corn supplier again, it needs to rebuild not just its logistics, but its reputation. Until then, the containers will keep stacking up. The grain bins will stay full, and the silence from buyers will keep growing louder. The story of the US corn collapse is not over. In fact, it is just beginning, because the real damage is not just in the shipments we lost. It is in the relationships we are struggling to get back. And as the world quietly moves on, American farmers are left wondering how everything changed so fast, and why no one had the decency to say it out loud.